Today's guest is Damion Lupo, and we're going to go deep into life beyond money and overcoming ourselves. Damion has spent over $1 million investing himself. Let's find out what he learned. Welcome to Richer Soul, Life Beyond Money, the last baby step. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money? To be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Today, we're going to talk about how to live life like this. It's up to you if you choose to go this way. Many want to, but so few people actually take action. For those of you who want to take action and need help living the life of their dreams to bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality, you can see how on richersoul.com by looking under the Coaching Call tab to hear actual coaching sessions. If you haven't had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. It's simpler than you can imagine. You can also find all the show notes for this and every episode on the website. I have a monthly email, and you can also sign up. I share the best articles I read this month, let you know about upcoming episodes, and share a little bit of wisdom that I've learned this month. I also share the most interesting articles I read every week on Facebook at facebook.com/Richer Soul. Today's quote is by Ben Franklin. By failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. Our guest today is Damion Lupo, and he is a best-selling author in personal finance and money thinking. He's host of Transformation Nation podcast, owner of over 30 plus companies, and founder of his own martial art, Yokido. Damion outrightly rejects regret and speaks to it as the ultimate life failure. He has a unique approach to living a fulfilled life by breaking rules and making more mistakes faster than the competition. His key to success. Playing by a different set of rules, he even bought his first rental house with a Visa card. A move that snowballed into him owning 150 rental houses in 7 states in less than 5 years. In 2008, he lost the entire $20 million, but recreated his wealth and reinvented his life over 4 transformational years. Today, he leads 3 global companies with one unified mission: to free people from money bondage. Let's meet Damion. Welcome to Richer Soul, Damion. It's great to have you join us today. I'm really excited about our conversation.
Man, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's my honor. So, we always start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Well, I can tell you right now that school taught me that investing was about buying a stock and picking some stocks and seeing what happened over 30 days, and whoever had the biggest growth won. And I thought that was the opposite of good information looking back. My parents and my upbringing was that the lessons were we don't have enough. It was a big pushback whenever I wanted to go out and do things or spend money. I grew up in this scarcity environment, and I had to push back and break out of that because I think it's really easy to get stuck in that and then repeat it and then continue those same belief systems and then instill those in other people. And I just categorically rejected it and started my first business at 11 because my parents told me there was no money to play Nintendo. And I said, I don't buy that. So I'm going to go figure out how to do this.
And that's pretty amazing. I guess that was something that you were naturally born with, is that desire to go out and do something, or did something happen that sparked you to say, I'm not going to accept this?
I think there's a piece of all of us that has the initial curiosity mindset and the wanting and the initiative, and I think it gets beaten out of us by society and the teaching that making mistakes is wrong or going for things that are outside the box, that there's something wrong with that. I wanted to play Nintendo, and when I was being told no, I hadn't been beaten down into kind of a puddle at that point. I was still eager to figure it out, and I think that curiosity was what pushed me. And then once I got a little taste of it, forget about it. Like nothing was going to get in the way. I didn't care what was happening. If a meteor was coming at me, I was going to say, okay, I can totally dodge that thing. It didn't make any difference because I just had the taste.
That's amazing. So what was that first business that you got started with?
It's funny because this is like before Craigslist and before eBay and everything. I went to the newspaper and people had Nintendo games for sale, and they were, people would get bored. And so I became the solution to the problem. I bought all their games at once. I actually hired my parents to drive me and meet them. And so here I am, 11 years old, going out to negotiate with these other 11 and 12-year-olds, buying all their games wholesale. I mean, it's very classic wholesale retail model. And then I would play them and then ultimately get bored with them myself. And I would sell them one at a time for 50, 60, 100% over what I bought them for. So I got all the games I could play, and I ended up making a bunch of money. So it kind of worked out well.
And that's an amazing story. When you see the opportunity, you just go out and do it. And I think those opportunities exist throughout life. You just have to see it and take action on it.
So that actually brings up a really good point, that basically we've been told in recent years that if you just think hard enough, and this came from The Secret, the idea of the law of attraction, which I fundamentally disagree with. I'll tell you why. If you sit there all day and you think really hard, a pile of money, a bag of money is going to fall from the sky and hit me in the head. You're going to end up old and broke. The truth is, if you just realize all these opportunities, like you just said, are right in front of you, it's the law of awareness. It's not the law of attraction. They're right there. Everything with the people that you want in your life, the opportunities, it's all sitting in front of you if you will basically flip your reticular activator on in your brain by saying, here's what I'm looking for, and then you just step outside your front door. You're going to bump into it. It's already there. You just have to be aware of it.
I totally agree with that. That's the one thing I find. A lot of times when I'm on coaching calls with people, we sit down and I'm like, you've got all these elephants in your room. They're right there in front of you. Go. And I think that's the biggest problem. Sometimes we're just so close up to it, we don't see all the opportunity in front of us. And we have to take a step back or have someone who helps us kind of shift our lens of how we're looking at something to open up the fact that it's all sitting right there, ready for you to go attack it if you're willing to do the work.
Yeah, it really is the perspective. It's the lens that we're looking through. There's a story about some natives, I think it was in Australia, where some Europeans showed up on the shores and the natives couldn't actually see the ship because they had no reference for that. So these invaders that came in and ultimately decimated them, they simply couldn't see it. So this is where what you just said is so important. Having a coach or having somebody that has seen these things that you trust to give you that perspective, they've got the vantage, they've got the lens, and you get to borrow that. That's powerful when you haven't actually been through the thing, to be able to actually trust what you're seeing.
That is very insightful. You have one son, is that correct?
I have no sons.
No sons. Okay.
No sons yet.
Oh, do you have kids or no kids?
No kids.
Oh, for what? Why? I know. I thought I heard you on a podcast talking about a kid. All right, I should have checked.
There's a want. There was a show one time, and somebody said, "So we have a question. Do you want kids? You mentioned you want kids." Funny story. I actually had somebody reach out to me and say, "Hey, I'd really like to set you up with my sister. I heard that you wanted kids from a show I listened to." So it was kind of a funny thing.
I was just going to ask about how you were teaching your kids about money, but that's fine. So you started out in the business. And you started making money. It sounds like 50 to 100% markup. And things must have just gone phenomenally well. And no bumps, no hiccups. And you have financial success. Is that what turned out?
Totally, man. I mean, I had that fairy tale life, and that would be a big lie if I actually told you that was true. And what's really true is that I made money. And part of the whole process of making money and doing business is that you stub your toe when you're out there with live fire, like with real bullets happening. One of the mistakes, I've lost all my money several times. The very first time I turned 18 and somebody gave me a tip for a stock that they had been investing in. And I said, this is great. And he told me about how much he had been making over the previous months. And I got excited, and I took everything I had saved up. I'd worked my butt off in high school. I sold my car. I had this money. It's about $10,000, and I bought stock, on my birthday. Within like 6 months, that stock had done a reverse split where I started off with like 1,000 shares, and now I had 250 shares, and then it went to zero. So I went, okay. So I had to start over, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot about listening to people and having no idea why I was doing something. It was a really good lesson. It also showed me that you don't die if you lose money. If you make a mistake, you get to learn and you get humbled. And that's a great opportunity for growth. It's the thing that people are afraid of, and it's what holds them back. And I just got started in that whole slapping around a little bit earlier than most.
It's funny. The stock tip is one of those things, and I think it's just a fear of missing out that causes people to, that guy's going to make money and I'm not. I've got to get in on this bandwagon. And more often than not, it is exactly what happened to you. You lose money over time. Yeah,
and people, I've seen people do that in the real estate market 10 years ago when I blew up. I had a $20 million portfolio that I had built and had done over a 5-year period in my 20s, went from zero to that, and thought I was pretty important and pretty powerful, and I thought I was really smart. And then I got run over by the economy freight train, and I realized that a lot of people, including me, were in the game because we didn't want to miss out. I didn't start that way, but ultimately when things went really well and I sold a lot of things and had millions of dollars in cash, I didn't want to miss out because the train seemed to still be going. I didn't realize I was about to get run over by it. But I went back out and started buying things based on no fundamentals, based on hysteria, which is what I'm seeing a lot in some of the markets now. And I got caught up in the same dumb stuff. We truly do get this thinking. This thinking happens where we think if we're not involved, then our life is going to be incomplete. And it scares us more, and we stop thinking about the actual idea that we may be doing something that's psychotic. The FOMO absolutely drives us. And sometimes you can make more money and have more success and more happiness by doing absolutely nothing for a period of time. But people refuse to do that. They got to be in the game, and they make dumb decisions.
Well, I think we're almost pushed to be in the game. I mean, everyone's always, if you're not in the game, the other guy can't make money. So everyone wants you in the game so they can make money. And they also want you in the game because they want to feel good about themselves. Like, hey, I'm making money in real estate. You're hanging out with me. You should make money in real estate too, because if I lose money alone, then I'm the fool. If we all lose money together, I guess, it's kind of being in that same group think, I guess.
It is. And there's this other thing that really messes us up, especially today. 10 years, it was just starting to happen. But now we're so addicted to these screens that, like on Facebook, all we see is highlight reels of everybody's amazing life. And so we say, well, shoot, my life sucks. I mean, I'm struggling. I got problems. If I just go out there and do these things, these people, I'll be like those people because they have no problems. And it's a lie. We're just not seeing reality. We're just seeing the highlight reels. And so we tend to make irrational decisions based on not the whole truth. We're not really seeing behind the scenes. And if we were to sit still for a minute and actually get some perspective, we'd be making very, very different decisions.
I have two questions. I want to get back to the sitting still, but you've gone through these failures, and yet you seem to get back up and just go again. You don't seem to let them hold you down. I see a lot of people have a failure and they refuse to stand up and try again. How have you been able to do that?
The trick, and John Maxwell talks about this in Failing Forward a bit, a great book, by the way, that you have to realize that failing is, and failure, it's a verb, it's not a noun. And the fear is that by failing, we become a failure. And so we avoid that because we don't want to have people judge us. We don't want our peers to think we're an idiot. And the truth is we're being idiots by not failing faster. And so when I had those first failures, they were painful, but when you lose $10,000, it's something. But when you lose 20 million, at that point, you really, in my experience, I lost who I was because I was my net worth, and my self-worth and net worth were so entangled that it took me a lot longer to regroup and recover because I didn't really have any identity outside of just that cash. That was one of the huge lessons. It was the understanding that, okay, wait, there's got to be something else that's driving me, not just more cash, to consume more, to be a hedonist. It was really I had to rewire, and that took a few years. So it wasn't an immediate bounce back, and that's one of the hardest things about falling on your face when you're so intertangled with your money. You put yourself in a timeout box for a while, and it's because you're kind of paralyzed from the pain and the trauma. So that was the longest timeout period I had, where I was basically scared, beat up, and bleeding. It did take longer, but you know what? When you get used to this whole process and you realize that thing didn't kill me. You know, Rocky, we're really afraid that there's something in the bushes that's going to jump out and eat us. Like if we go into the bushes of the unknown, the dark forest, something might eat us. And I grew up in Alaska, so this actually could happen because there were bears outside. You could actually be eaten in your front yard in the woods. If you don't live in Alaska and you're not in the bush of Africa, the likelihood you're going to be eaten by anything is really, really low. Like it's not going to happen. So what are we really afraid of? We're really afraid of judgment because our self-esteem and our self-worth is really kind of tied into something else, and probably something we don't have a whole lot of control of.
It's interesting you say that. The same part of the brain that lights up when the bear shows up in the woods and scares you is the same part that lights up when you lose money. And you get the same feelings. It's almost like mortal danger at that point. And I think that's why we end up in that fear place at that moment.
I think that's true. That it is true because why? Because what is money? I mean, money is the energy. It's the thing that allows us to have a roof and food. It's basic security.
It is. And you seem to have disconnected your self-worth from your net worth. How has that happened, and how do you, that's a different viewpoint than what most people look at the world as?
There was a shift, and this is going to be really important for people to think about and probably take a note on and just really dive into, that we have this idea around financial freedom and what finances are. I've worked with a lot of people that come to me and they say, I want help with my money. And I'll say, well, what do you want help with? And they'll say, well, I've got a couple $1 million and I'm scared to death I'm going to lose it. Or they'll come in and they'll say, I've got all these different properties and I've got these things and I'm terrified that something's going to happen in the economy. And so what that has told me over the years is that people are totally connected to the wrong C's. They're connected to the cash, they're connected to the cash flow, whether they're trying to get it or whether they have it. What they're not really understanding is that the confidence, when you have the confidence baked into your DNA, and you only get the confidence by doing things and going through the process, you're never going to read a book and have the confidence. Once that happens, then you're free. And that was the big shift for me when I lost the cash, lost the cash flow. I said, well, shoot, my confidence had been shaken. And when I rebuilt the confidence, then there was this freedom that set in. And now I'm not concerned about whether something works or doesn't work. All I know is that I'm either going to win at something or I'm going to learn. I'm not going to lose. And that's the big shift, because I go into it with a different attitude. I'm going to go into this thing to get better, to get stronger, to have more impact. I'm not going in just for the money. That is the worst possible scenario, because it doesn't work every time. This is not academics where you get 7 out of 10 in your average. I mean, in the real world, if you get 5 out of 10 in anything, you're a gazillionaire. So you have to get used to that if you want to have any type of success and actual achievement. I mean, otherwise you're basically going to be stuck at being a professor of thinking and not really doing.
And taking action is always important. So you're sitting here, you've got let's just say for argument's sake, a 7-figure net worth, and yet you've got fear of it's losing. So what's the first step then in shifting that mindset to say, how do you let go of the fear and say, it'll all be okay? Because I think a lot of us deal with that. And if you turn on the TV, especially CNBC, it's nothing but fear.
There's a belief system that we think that there's scarcity, and it drives us into this belief that whatever we have to defend it, and otherwise if it goes away, we're going to die. And one of the steps that I work with people on and get them in the practice of, so they get really good at it, is simply letting go of things. And the practical application for that is you start to let go of your money. You start to give it away. You start to realize when you're being charitable. And the worst thing that I've heard people say is, well, once I have money, once I have $1 million, I'll give away 10%. And I say, no, you make your 50,000 and you're not even giving away $5 right now. So that mentality is going to keep people broke, because it's kind of the same mentality as looking at a fireplace and saying, hey, once you give me heat, then I'll give you wood. That's not how it works. You've got to give first. And once you do that, you start realizing how abundant things are, and it opens you up. It's kind of the idea of if you're tight and you're holding on really, really hard to your body, it's hard to breathe. And if you open up your arms, you start to have this breath and you can start seeing things. But if you're tight, you're going to have tunnel vision and you really lose out. So you've got to have a practice of something that opens you up. And to do that, to start, one of the best options is to start finding ways to give money away. And people go, well, I don't have any extra money. There's a reason you don't have extra money, because you're so obsessed with the money and you think it's a limited thing. It's just made up. And once you get into that space by practice, then you start really understanding that there's more than you'll ever need. There's more than you'll ever want. And it shifts you, but you've got to build that muscle. And most people don't have any of that muscle at all. It's like completely atrophied, if it was even there.
I was going to say that. And I think it takes a lot to build that muscle. I guess you can start small, though. And we've had some.
Right, absolutely.
We've had some guests who come on who, one small practice they do is when they go and buy coffee in the morning, is they just pay for the coffee behind them.
Yeah, I love that one.
And they walk away.
It's so simple.
It's so simple.
Amazing.
And they don't want to thank you. They kind of want to do it and go and just feel good about themselves. And I think that's a thing people need to learn is you feel great when you give, especially when there's no expectation of anything coming back in return. It's good to just let go and to be.
It's empowering when you do that without the need to stroke your ego. Like when you do that thing and it's anonymous. I remember pulling up and there was somebody on the side of a road. We've probably all seen this, where there's somebody that's begging. They've got a sign and they're hungry or whatever it is. And there's a lot of us that will think, I can't give this person money because they're going to go use it for drugs or alcohol. They're going to squander it. And so we have all this judgment. And I remember one guy in particular, I drove by and the guy had no legs and he was sitting there in the rain. And I almost started crying. I was thinking, oh my gosh, do I have any problems? I mean, this guy's he's probably sick too. I mean, it's just, so instead of judging these things, if we can start opening our hearts to things, all sorts of amazing providence happens. But if we have all these stories we tell ourselves and they're really excuses for not being generous, then we become a bunch of greedy butts and we're going to be really, really limited in our ability to create wealth.
That's very true. And I think one of the things that people don't talk about, and I've heard you mention, is that there is a massive cost to creating wealth. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? What you have to give up in order to make lots of money sometimes?
The biggest thing that you have to give up is your previous belief systems. And there is a price to pay. Part of the belief systems that you're going to have to give up are that the people that are around you are the best people to continue to be around you. And we tend to believe that our tribe is going to keep us safe and they're fun. But the problem is, if we have a different vision, most likely we're going to have a different group of people that are going to be going into the future with us. And there's a price you pay when you start shifting, when you start creating abundance, because people will pull you down and you'll have to work longer and harder and with different thinking than basically everybody that's been around you from the past. And this is painful because people will try to get you to stay where they are. And this is going to sound harsh. The reality is that people will do that because the moment that you actually have the success, that you break out, it's going to make them wrong about them not doing it. And people don't want to be wrong. They want those things, but they're afraid. And when you do it, you're going to inspire some. You will irritate and piss off other ones because you made them wrong. So that's the consequence. And so you've got to be willing to pay the price of people that will leave you. They'll call you crazy. You're going to spend your time. If you don't become obsessed, though, it's about something, then really what is your life going to be? It's going to be a huge regret that you're going to look back on and go, damn, I really missed that one.
And regrets are terrible things to have. It's a shame to live a life of regrets.
You know, Rocky, that there was an event that happened a few years ago. I mean, it's a pretty significant event. When my father was really sick, he and I had our last conversation at a coffee shop, and we were talking, and And he looked at me and he said, there were so many things that I wanted to do. And I died a little bit because I saw and I felt and I experienced regret of someone in their last days that was looking back and going, oh man, I did not play full out and I don't get that. I don't get a redo. And it was brutal. And it just made me think, okay, I'm not going to get a redo at some point either. So what do I want to do now that I have the choice? And we all have this choice. So what are we going to do? Are we going to play full out? Or are we going to sit back and go, I'm going to be safe? The pain is coming if you go for the safe thing.
Failure is a lot better than regret because you can overcome failure.
Totally. And again, it's a verb. It's not a noun. It's not who you are. It's what you've learned from. And anybody that's out there that we look up to has fallen down a lot. And that's a reason why they got to where they are. We don't look up at people and say, oh, you're amazing and you've never failed. If somebody hasn't failed, like in investing or in money, either one, they're lying, or two, they're lying, or they're just brand new. And but most people that say that, I just simply don't believe them, or I don't trust they have any experience, because experience comes with blood and it comes with some pain.
And you have to go through that. But it's during that journey that the fun is. Because I remember from my dad, and I think the biggest struggle that he had in life was when he was young, they had to leave where they were because of a war and go somewhere else. They had to essentially become refugees and relocate. And I think it was also the part of his life that was most exciting, because there was change and things were going on. And even though it was bad, he still remembers it with fondness, even though you had to go through that kind of struggle and give up everything and essentially restart your life. And as part of that, though, I think that's the reason he was so content, and he didn't worry about stuff anymore, and he didn't fuss over the money because it became unimportant.
I think you're really hitting on something that's incredibly important, in that when you go through this stuff and you do have this fulfillment in the process, and you struggle through things, it allows you to let go of all the nitpickery, if that's a word, around the stuff that bothers us. When you're really pushing things, you don't get wound up about the stuff that bugs most people, because you're in the middle of such an amazing process. If all you have to look forward to is that moment where the thing happens, where you have like the success, you're screwed, because either you're going to get it or you won't. If you don't, you're always annoyed. And if you do get it, it's going to be gone the moment after it's over. And then you're going to say, well, now what is it? So this is why it's so important to figure out what the thing is that's going to fulfill you in the process. And the other thing, when you're in the middle of these crazy things that happen, that these life experiences, it make the best stories. I mean, you get to share these stories. Like that's where you get those crazy experiences.
That is very true, and it's the power of the story that brings about change. Okay. So I struggle with one thing, and I ask this question of a lot of people. It is, if you went and saw 100 people and you told, just in general, what percentage of people are actually going to take action and make change?
Well, here's an interesting statistic. When you look at most investment or seminars, whether it's a Tony Robbins seminar or it's a financial education type of thing, the typical implementation, the action takers, it's less than 10%. Often it's less than 5%. And these are the people that paid money to go to something to change their life. I think we've been trained to be safe. We've been trained to sit in a box, to make sure that we don't interrupt the teacher, and to do as we're told, and everything is going to be fine. So here's what that means. There's not a lot of competition if you're actually going to go do stuff. It might seem like there is because you see people doing stuff, but the masses aren't doing anything. They're playing it safe. They're being numbed out by their consumption stuff and by the modern day Roman gladiator games in various forms. And people are basically lazy. And so if you're not one of those, if you're willing to do something, it's an amazing space, because you shift into a place where there truly is very little competition.
It's funny because we were in Italy this summer and we went to the Colosseum, and it literally looks like a football stadium. It's hilarious. And the whole way it's set up and the whole way people behave. I'm like, 2,000 years and we really haven't changed at all. We're still the same. Is it laziness, or is it fear, or is it conditioning? What causes so few people to be willing to lean out and try?
Well, I really think that in large part, we're in a place where things are easy, and we don't have to do much. And so there's this lethargic lack of momentum. If you were to have one of these events like World War II or something that was major, that was stirring everybody up, I think you could stimulate people into action. But most people aren't going to go out there and say, hey, I want to go find a way to hurt and have a lot of pain. And when you're out there going for your dreams, there is pain, and it's simply easier and less painful in the time, for the time being, to just kind of play it safe. And there's a big unknown factor, where you don't know what's behind that curtain. And so it's easier to be lazy. We can basically be sitting here being fat, dumb, and happy, because it doesn't hurt us or kill us for a while until it does. And then you can't do anything about it. So I think we're just it's normalized. There's kind of a cognitive bias towards this normalcy of what we have had, what we have seen, and what's around us. And it's where you're just there. So you've got to have a compelling mission, a reason why you're going to do something different. And I think it's incredibly important. In fact, it's critical. You've got to have the right people around you that are going to inspire and pull you up, not down.
And I believe that. How do you find those people? Because if we talk about it, I mean, the reality is if I always use the number of about 3%. How do you find your particular 3% and connect with them?
The first thing you really have to do is just inundate yourself. And you can call it whatever you want, whether you want to call it brainwashing or just beating yourself into submission for these ideas. I started doing this 20 years ago with tapes, the actual tapes with like little spinny things on them, that with the reel and everything. And I would just listen to people until I broke my tapes, until they wore out. And so my mindset started shifting, where I was absorbing these things. I even started talking like some of these people, and I became what those people were in terms of their thinking, because that just became all I was hearing. And so that's one way to do it. That's who you're around. If you're hanging out at football games and you're just with a bunch of folks that are talking that language, that's what you're going to speak. So that's one way to do it. You become it, and then you do the things that those people do, whoever that is, your vision of you, and then you start to have the things. So becoming it, and I think the first time I heard of this whole process was Robert Kiyosaki years ago, where he talked about be, do, have. And that's how that was my being shift. It was going into that space by absorbing those people. And then when you're around them, they feel comfortable with you being kind of like them. The worst thing you can do is having an ego and thinking you know anything when you show up around people like that, because they simply aren't going to acknowledge you or give you any time if you're going to tell them what you know. They don't care what you know. You've got to be open and willing, and not only willing to learn, but willing to take action. And it's amazing what kind of support you can get from people that have already been down the path if you're open to listen and you're open to do what is being suggested, which a lot of people will do. They'll totally give you time, but you've got to be willing to do stuff. And if you fight them, they're gone.
And that's very important, and it's very insightful, is successful people want to be around successful people. They're always looking for those people, and they are willing to help them. And the best thing you need to do is just, as you said, take action, and then email them and tell them you took action, because the door will open even wider. And the more you do that, the floodgates open, and will give you everything.
That's a great idea. I mean, it makes me think about that over the years, the very few people, in fact, I can't even think of an example of somebody that had come to me and asked for help or guidance, and then I suggested something. Typically it was a book that would give them a lot, and it wouldn't require me to give them the cliff notes. They could just go read it. I don't know that I've had anybody come back and say, hey, I read this one, and what's next? I mean, it's so powerful to do that. I actually had some guys, these 3 young guys from Romania that I met at a conference in Dallas a few weeks ago. And I could tell these guys were the type that would go do things. They're doing real estate investing. They're brand new, and they are focused. They are committed. They're absorbing, and they're asking questions. And I just felt really compelled to spend time with them and do what I could to give them my insights to help them accelerate their path. And they were very open to listening. That was a huge difference from a lot of people that I run into. They have excuses and they have reasons, but what they don't have is their dreams coming true. They're just really stuck. And so I was inspired by these guys, these young guys that were willing to ask questions and hang out and be open to whatever I had to share.
That's really cool. And I think people need to do that. Like, it costs you nothing to ask a question. It costs you next to nothing to read a book, and it costs nothing to send an email back or a thank you card, or literally writing out the old school way, a thank you card and a line of maybe something you learned, and then ask that next question. What's next?
We have this thing, this abundance of options to connect with people, whether it's Twitter or it's Facebook or LinkedIn. I find it fascinating how many people on LinkedIn reach out to me with a canned pitch instead of anything that's interesting, or they haven't done any research. They're just trying to pitch me on selling me something, or they want to become part of my network. And I'm thinking, you know what? I'm willing to have anybody in my network if they're authentic. And I'm amazed. It's so easy now to find people and connect with them. And what your idea with the handwritten card, you want to make a statement, do that, because how many handwritten anythings do we get anymore? I mean, like, I can't remember the last year I got one. I don't even think I've had a birthday card in the last 5 years. If somebody did that, it would stick out like crazy. But you know why we don't do it? Because it takes time, and we want to do everything fast and free. And that's a big problem, but it's also a big opportunity.
So, there's websites that you can actually go online and you just type the quick message and they will print it for you and make it look like handwriting and stamp it and send it for you.
There's every technology, every option. It's unbelievable.
They make it easy. I guess the bottom line is you've got to do something. You've got to get off your butt and go try it and lean in and take action and get over yourself. I think that is true. Now, just because I'd love for the audience to hear this, how much do you think you've spent on self-development?
Easily $1 million. I don't know how far past it is, but I mean, I had one mentor in particular I paid $400,000 to. I've been to, who knows, hundreds of events over the last 20 years. And some of these are hundreds of dollars. One of them in particular was $18,000 for a few days. So I have a 7-figure investment in myself. And that's the thing when somebody says, what do I invest in? Or what kind of business should I start? I say, well, first off, the investment that you make is in yourself. You working on you, the return will be more than anything in the history of the world investment-wise. You have to start with yourself. And then people go, no, yeah, but should I do real estate? Or should I do a business? And I say, you're not listening. The answer is very simple. Go open a book. Start shifting you. And then you'll find your way into the right thing. But stop focusing on the thing. People are obsessed with the hack. I love Tim Ferriss, but I think he's screwed a lot of people up because everybody thinks they can do everything in 4 minutes. 4-hour work week and all this kind of stuff. You got to be willing to invest in yourself, and that takes more than 4 hours a week.
Tim works a lot more than 4 hours a week.
That's the other thing.
He does.
A little hypocritical. You're totally right. He works his butt off. That guy is like a human petri dish for human development.
He is, and he probably works more hours than there are in a week.
Without a doubt, he works at least 200 or 300 hours a week.
So, yeah, I think it was a catchy title for a book. And I think what his point in the book, and which I totally agree with, is to systematize your life and get rid of the stupid things and focus on what's important and spend your time there. And I think that's the message. People might have gotten it wrong.
I agree. We look for the thing that's going to make things easier, and you're right. That is the message. It's systemizing. And one of the most powerful things that you can do, all of us can do, is to say no to almost everything. I mean, I think it was Warren Buffett that said it, that the difference between successful and super successful people say no to almost everything. And we say yes. I mean, we're chasing squirrels. It makes me crazy with some of the people I've hired and worked with over the years, especially the ones in their 20s, where they've got all these different devices and all these different platforms. And I go, how long are you able to focus on the thing that we're actually working on? It's like seconds or minutes before there's disruption and they're chasing something else because they're not wanting to say no to anything. And if you can say no to most things, you're going to go deep into the right things. And that's where you're going to find the fulfillment and the power of creation and actually enjoying your life.
And I think that's one of the things that comes up. And I talk about this a little bit, and I talk about it much more on spending, in the sense of you have to create the counter to the yes. In other words, if someone asks you to do something, you can't just say, oh, should I do this? Yes or no. You should say, if I do this, or if I spend this, what am I giving up? And you need to have that bigger why or that bigger purpose or that bigger goal. And you need to be clear on it so that you have the counterbalance to say, someone's asked me to do this. Is this taking me away from my bigger picture, or is it bringing me closer? And that allows you to make a much more informed decision and move in the right direction.
I like it. That was one of my problems back in the 2000s when I was making all this money. I didn't have a mission except for making money. And that's a terrible mission, by the way, just to make money, because you're willing to do basically anything. The ends justify the means. And the other big shift from understanding my why, the big driver, was understanding who I am. And we all need to understand that. And that's really it's figuring out what the values are. Once you figure out your values, and I'm not talking about having 200 values, I'm talking about what are your core ones. Once you have your core values, and I know what my core values are now, very, very clear, very clean. The reason that's so important is because when you're offered opportunities to engage with certain people or certain activities, either there's going to be an alignment or a violation of those values and your mission, your why in life. So now if somebody were to say, one, do you want to go to a strip club and hang out? It violates a lot of my values. If they said, do you want to invest in a strip club? I would say no, even though they produce a ton of cash. I mean, they're truly amazing investments, but it violates my rules. It violates my values. Before, when I didn't have these things, I would have invested in anything. I basically would have hung out with anybody. Once you have those things, you have a playbook for your life, and it makes things a lot easier because you're not trying to figure out, well, what's the right decision? Should I do this? Should I not? It becomes very, very clear. Your values and your mission decide for you.
And so this kind of comes back to something we touched on early on, which is creating the space and taking the time to figure all those things out. And to actually say, what are my values? What do I want from life? What is important to me? And where am I going?
It takes a pause. It takes a moment where you've got to ask those questions and you've got to set yourself up. Like when I really spent time doing that, I flew across the country and sat in a hotel lobby and I thought about it for an entire day. And I sat there and I had this big mess of work figuring out, okay, what are those values? What is really important when it comes down to it, and who am I? And if you don't do that, it's too easy to say I don't have time. The number of times I've talked to people that have businesses and have no values for their business, my question to them is, how the heck do you know who to hire? Because of a personality profile? I mean, what if they're out of alignment? What if they're willing to do anything to get a result, and you have honesty and integrity as your core value, but you haven't really defined it and you haven't used it as a filter? You're going to have a bunch of goons that are really, really productive doing things that are going to ultimately bankrupt you and break you. So you have to be willing to take a pause and figure those things out. And then once you have them and you figure out that mission, like my mission is to free 1 million people from financial bondage. It's very, very clear. All the work I do, this interview right now, it's about empowering people and breaking them out of those shackles. If something comes to me and it's not in alignment with that, I'm really clear. It's a no thank you. And it's because the time was taken, it was invested. And that's what you're doing. You're investing your time to get real clarity. I mean, there is power in clarity. If you don't have clarity around these things, you really don't have power. What you have is a lot of force. You're forcing your way through things. You're pushing, you're pulling, and that's not going to get you where you want to go. You need to find the flow, and the flow comes from having that mission and the values that guide it.
What percent of people do you, and it probably comes back to the same percent as we talked about before, are clear in this type of thing?
I think that if it was 1%, I'd be amazed. And I know it's not. It's, when we think about the top 1% in society in terms of economics, they're more likely to be clear about this stuff. I think the major thought leaders and change agents that we are inspired by, those people I think are consistently focused on their mission and they know who they are. That's the big differentiator. The money and the wealth and the success it's a side effect. It's an offshoot of being clear on those things. So if you want that stuff, if you want that wealth, if you want that freedom, you got to start with this. You can't start with the wealth and then think you're going to get it. So it's so rare. Again, no competition once you have that, because you're going to become obsessed about the thing that matters so much. It's going to wake you up at 3:00 in the morning with you excited versus going, oh my gosh, I got to go to work. It's going to be the other thing. You can't wait to get started.
I totally agree with that. So let's kind of just talk what creates a happy and successful life Because it's not money, is it?
No, I mean, money is, it's funny because money is not important unless you don't have any. And then all of a sudden it becomes kind of important. It's like oxygen. It's not important until you get stuck under the water in the pool, and then it's the only thing that matters. So but there's a point where, and I've seen studies where the amount of money falls off in terms of importance, and it's somewhere between $80,000 and $120,000 a year. You get to a point where you're kind of at that place of happiness, and you keep going beyond it. You're going to trade your time typically for more money that's not going to make you happier. And so what is happy? I mean, what makes you happy? What makes you fulfilled? We get obsessed with this idea of money because we think it equates to certainty, and certainty is security, which is one of our basic human needs. The thing that makes us happy is deep contribution. It's love and connection with other people. It's growth. It's variety. It's experiences. Those are the other human needs that we let be distant secondaries to the certainty one. And the other S, which is a complete sham, is significance. And we let our egos drive this with things like, I remember I thought, hey, this will be great. I'm going to go buy a Ferrari. So I bought a Ferrari. I had a significant shiny object, and it just exhausted me both financially and emotionally because I was always afraid somebody's going to try to hijack me or ding the door. The S's, the security and the significance, screw us up, but they tend to drive us and push us instead of us focusing on the ones that are really going to give us fulfillment and a life that is worth living. The other ones are what we need to focus on. They'll create the security and the significance because of those.
Absolutely. And Tony Robbins is very good about helping people make that change. I went last year to his program with my wife, and I brought one of my kids, and that is a big part of his shift, is moving away from security and significance and getting to love and contribution and growth and giving back and doing more. And that's where the happiness starts to build.
It is. It's funny that if you say, well, I'm going to contribute, well, okay, so what is it that gets you fired up? And if you don't have the thing that gets you fired up, then the default is to fall back into making more money. And so you have to take a second to ask what drives you? What did you think about as a kid that makes you really excited? Or what can you imagine? I always like to ask the question, would you do your work for free? Because I have almost nobody that's ever said yes. It's very, very rare. If you find that thing that you love and you would do it for free and you couldn't wait to do it every day and it's like play, that's amazing. And usually there's an economic opportunity in it. Now, if you're doing underwater basket weaving, you might have to move to Fiji, but there are options, and you just have to ask that question instead of being a whore all the time. And that's what most of us have bought into, that we have to be a whore for this piece of paper with dead presidents on it. I mean, that's a dumb life choice.
It is. I have learned to make the shift because I started off chasing the American dream and looking to chase the wealth. And over time, I have come to realize that there is much more to life than money. There's a lot more out there, and that you've got to find balance in life, and you have to look for people to help you and do all of these things. Richer Soul there's a whole bunch of giving going on here with no expectation of return. And my biggest goal is just to, if I can get some of that 97% to start taking a turn and become part of those couple percent and start transforming their life, that's cool. That's what I want to see happen, is people just take control and bring balance to their life and live it with purpose and go out and make change, because it isn't that hard. I think that's the biggest thing. People think it's hard, but it's not. It's all sitting right in front of you. And you're a perfect example of that.
Well, I appreciate that. It's nice to be an example and not a warning. I mean, it's a little frustrating sometimes when you realize, oh man, I hope people can learn from this and never do what I did. Like you just said something that I hope people caught it. It was really important, and that was the things that we do. We tend to have this expectation of something that comes back to us instead of openly giving that thing. And it's almost cute when somebody says, "Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for your time. What can I do for you?" And my reaction is, go do something with what I just gave you. And then, you know what? Make your mark, make your impact, do your thing. I don't need anything from you other than you to pay attention and tap into your potential. And if we can focus our efforts on empowering people and not trying to figure out what we're going to get out of everything that we're doing, I think the world starts changing. I think the 3% can ripple into the other 97.
Absolutely. And so you're working on a project. Is it called Transformation Nation?
Yeah, Transformation Nation. It's the show that's launching, and it's about shifting the whole financial thinking and spreading the financial literacy with people. It's about building the confidence, because if we can start to shift the confidence of people around finances and money and rewire them, it starts to, I think it calms things down. It starts to remove the conflict. And that if we think about the conflict that happens, it's about power and it's about money and it's about people being scared. And when we take the conflict out, this comes from my martial art background in Aikido and a martial art I founded called Yokido, that when you take the conflict out, you're able to go into a relationship and be more present with people. And that's what we're really focusing on with this project, is having those conversations and then giving people the tools so that they can practice the stuff. Because you can learn, you can read a book about martial arts, but you got to be on the mat. You got to be learning it by doing it. And this is a practical process for actually going through the what needs to be done to build the muscle. And it's building that confidence. I mean, that is what this is all about, building the confidence muscle so that you are truly free. That's what I wish on everyone, to be financially free. And it's not the cash flow, it's that confidence that we're going to help you build.
And that's awesome. And I applaud you for doing that and for being part of the group that's going out there and doing that. And that's the one thing I've found surprising is over the last couple of years, I have seen kind of a movement in this area of more and more people kind of coming on board and more people willing to just teach and give and kind of blaze a new path to say, there is a better way. And here's how you can do this.
Yeah, there is something that's happening, and it's not necessarily a conflict between Western thinking, the rugged individualism in America that is all about what I can do, and this capitalism that's been really crapped on by a lot of the world. It's not that versus the socialistic, we're all in this together, we're going to kumbaya ourselves and we're not going to produce anything. I think it's more about, it's about a collective mindset that we actually are in this thing together as humans, and it's not me versus you. It's not a limited sum game, that there is really an abundance out there, and I don't have to hurt you to get what I want. I don't have to take something. I can actually provide things, and it's a way where we're moving into more trust. We're not having to go out there and try to force things. There's a lot of power in trust. David Hawkins wrote a book called Power versus Force, where he really goes into the energy levels of things like trust versus shame or versus ego. There's all these different things, these emotions. And if we start moving into a place of trust and love and connection, everything starts changing and the wars go away and hostility goes away and the peace starts to show up in our lives. That's what we all want, but we have to start moving into a place of trust. We can't say, okay, prove it and then I'll do something. We actually, and you're seeing that. You mentioned it. There is a shift going on, and it is cool.
What's the first step? Because I think in a lot of these cases, people do have all those emotions. What's the first step to letting go of the emotions?
One question. It's the question that I wrote about in Reinvented Life with Chris when we wrote the book 5 years ago. It was the question I asked myself for 2 straight years in therapy, literally every week. One question: what is true? When we ask that question, the deeper we go, the more layers we peel back, we start to understand who we really are. We start to be able to observe ourselves and not just be like animals reacting all the time. It's fascinating. Once we really understand what is true, we start to uncover those things that are hurting us. We understand the drivers. We can start adjusting those. Otherwise, we're just bouncing off the surface. It's one question, simply, what is true?
We're kind of going through that struggle in our house now. I have teenagers, and we're looking at college. My son knows where he's going, in the sense he knows where his skill sets are. My daughter, who's older, doesn't know what she wants to go to college for. There's this whole thing, well, you have to go to college, and that's how you get a good job, and this is the path you must take. And it's like, these colleges want ungodly amounts of money these days for this, compared to when I went to school. You could work part-time and pay for college. Now you have to work a lifetime to pay back your loans. But the question is what is true? Do you really need to go to college, and is this worth it? And a whole bunch of other questions are kind of coming up of, what do you really need to live a life that you're thrilled with? The kids have to make their own choices. I'm not going to force them to do anything, but we are having these deeper conversations with them of pick your path right. Any advice for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can tell you that there is no formula anymore for get a good education, get a job, retire with a gold watch after 40 years, this whole thing. That formula is dead. There's such a shift in the world that when you show up and you've got a college degree, this has happened so many times, it doesn't really make any difference to somebody that is going to employ you. And so the question is, what does that mean? What do you do with that? Do we just not get one? You have to ask yourself, what is it that you want to do that you're going to spend the majority of your life doing? And if you want to be a doctor, yeah, you got to get a college education. But if you're an entrepreneur, or you want to be a professional, you want to take photographs, or whatever it is you want to do, I think if you don't know that, then the financial bondage that happens by going to college nowadays with these $250,000 undergrad programs, it's not worth it for you to figure it out. It's a better investment, I think, for parents if they're going to support their kids and their kids don't know what they're doing. This whole idea that you need to go to college to find yourself, I think is stupid. I think there's a better way. I would rather have somebody go travel the world for a year, which is a lot less expensive than pretty much every college out there now. Go do that, come back and say, hey, now I want to work with you and I've got perspective. I'd hire that person and pay them more than the person with a 4-year degree. I think you're just going to have a deeper tolerance and compassion for people. You're going to be able to do better work. You're going to be more grounded if you can do that type of thing. But just going to college and saying, well, that's going to get me a good job. How do you even know you want a job? I mean, I'm unemployable and I'm happy being unemployable. I got fired as a volunteer 7 years ago. I realized I'm really unemployable. This is a bad idea for me to try to get a job. And I dropped out of college 4 times. It never stuck. I actually got thrown out once because I put the bookstore out of business. So you've got to figure that stuff out. And if you don't know, why would you go into debt up to your eyeballs just to figure it out? I think that's a very, very dangerous plan that a lot of people do by default.
I see that because I'm in the rooms and I'm listening to the parents ask questions. I'm like, oh my, this is crazy. You're asking all the wrong questions and you've got all the wrong goals and purposes, and you're shackling your kid. I feel bad for them. But
Rocky, why are a lot of these people doing? I mean, if I'm a parent, and I've seen this with a lot of parents, and you being one, there is a social pressure to have your kid doing things and not just wandering. Like, you want to be proud. You don't want to say, oh, my kid, I don't know, he's just wandering the planet. And most parents are afraid to let their kids figure things out. I see a lot of parents that want to keep their kids safe, and so they're excited when their kids boomerang back into the bedroom, and they're there until they're 30. And I go, how embarrassing, how terrible for you to not kick your kid out and let them grow a spine. A lot of parents do this for themselves, where they want to feel good instead of saying, well, what's really best for my kid? They're going, well, you need to get a safe, secure job. Like, really? You're going to take your kid's soul away? Because you might be doing that if you say, go do that. I don't think any parent truly wants to do that, but that's the result of what's happening by going into this default movement of go to school, get a degree, get a job. I don't know if that's the right thing. Ask what is true. Start there.
In the true sense of the old days, when you got somewhat of a liberal arts degree, and I'm talking a real liberal arts degree, not what they do today, right. That was literally the question. What is true? They would go back and they would study thousands of years of history, the great thinkers, and ask themselves the question, what is true? And understand all of those human biases and figure things out. And then they were ready to go do whatever. And I think that's why you're seeing people who go through those old school liberal arts programs are getting hired everywhere, because they can think critically, they ask the questions, and they just don't take things face value. They dig into it. So from that standpoint, if you're willing to do that, I think that's one path. But there are 100 different paths, and I think people need to start realizing that.
They do. And just having a default one, or the one that you did as a parent, or I see a lot of entrepreneurs that are afraid for their kids to go be an entrepreneur. They're afraid for that. They want them to be safe because they experience so much pain, instead of trying to figure out what their kid is really going to do well and what they're going to be happy with. A lot of times kids do what's easiest so they don't have to have a fight with their parents. But maybe that's not what is really best for them. And I think it's important for parents to really dig into that and not just do the default, hey, this is best. My kid's going to have this cool certificate on the wall that's going to cost $250,000. Maybe that's not the best choice.
I guess I was lucky. We had a lot of wealthy relatives, and being immigrants, you saw things come and go over the years. And I just saw a lot of spoiled kids turn into pretty much rotten, spoiled adults that still had to leech off their parents as a kid, because they were never taught any. The parents did it because they wanted what they thought was best for their kid, and that wasn't what was best for their kid, unfortunately.
No.
Is there anything that we should have talked about today that we haven't covered?
I think that the essence of things, really boiling things down to the question of what is true and being willing and open to make mistakes and to learn and growth is such a paramount part of who we are as human beings. We're the only species that looks into the future, and so it's not like the Groundhog Day for many animals. It's just Groundhog Day, same thing every single day. For us, we have the ability to create this future. It's a choice. It really is a choice. If you want to reinvent your life, you get to choose. There is a playbook for it. There is a process of doing that. And well, I say you don't need to be born into the Lucky Sperm Club, but if you're listening to this, you probably are in the Lucky Sperm Club. If you're in the United States, you're in the Lucky Sperm Club because you have choices. You can write your own ticket. I believe that that's true. I know it's true. And if you don't believe it's true, go find people that do believe it and spend your time with them because they're going to shift your thinking.
That's absolutely true. What is one action step people should take based on our conversation today?
The thing that when I ask what is true, people go, okay, well, I don't even know what to do with that. Okay, the first thing you can do to figure out what is true, figure out what your behaviors are like, what your life is based on your behaviors. Okay, well, how do I do that? Simple. 3 things: your cash, your credit cards, and your calendar. If you want to understand who you are and what you're all about, see where you're spending your money, see what kind of impulses you have with credit cards, and see what is on your calendar and what you're spending your time with. That's what is going to give you massive amounts of truth, because you're going to see things you go, ooh, I don't really want to look at that because I don't like that, but that's what's true. So start there.
That's a wonderful and perfect suggestion. So can you share a little bit about where people can find you, what you're working on, and how they can connect?
Come visit me at DamionLupo.com. You can spell it any way you want because every URL, every domain is going to go to the same place. And visit there. That's where you're going to see Transformation Nation. And you're also going to see the platform that is also going live, that's going to have the entire process for breaking out of the shackles financially. It's going to give you massive amounts of tools for whatever you want to create in your life. Everything that I've been through and the people that I connect with, that I've learned from, we're putting it into a platform where it doesn't matter what your economic background is. It doesn't matter where you want to go. This is going to give you the process where you can build that muscle. You're going to take it as far as you want. It's all going to be available. It's all at DamionLupo.com.
And I will have links in the show notes to make it easy for you to just click and find that.
It's awesome.
Thank you so much for joining us today. That was quite an insightful conversation.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time.
I encourage you to check out Damion Lupo's site, DamionLupo.com. Clearly, where you focus your attention is where you get results. We learned a lot in this episode, and you may even want to go back and listen again to let the mindset shifts sink in. Today's action step. What are your behaviors? Look at your cash, credit cards, and calendar to see how you behave, and ask yourself, is this who you want to be? One of the biggest complaints I hear in the financial industry is over trust. Everyone has to ask the question, can I trust you? Unfortunately, there are a lot of people you can't. And when you're excited about the chance to make money, or you're fearful that you're going to miss out, we sometimes miss those signals that would have prevented us from getting in trouble. For some, having to spend a ton to save isn't fun. But as Damion talks about today, you have to invest in yourself. Stay away from what's trendy and focus on what's true. You'll have to take the time to figure that out for yourself. What's preventing you from moving forward, and who are you putting on your team to help you build the life you deserve? Taking no action creates a far worse outcome in life than trying something and failing. Can I help you achieve your goals? Just email me, and we can start with a short chat to see if we're a good fit. It's harder sometimes to keep wealth than it is to make it. Once you come up with a system to create wealth, you need a system to keep it. If you'd like a second opinion on your financial plans or are fearful you're missing out on something, check out the SWOT analysis. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats at richersoul.com/SWOT. Is there someone you know who could benefit from what we learned today? Please share, as it helps you build social capital and create better relationships and start better conversations with the people you know. They'll appreciate you for it. Thanks for listening. You can email me at rocky@richersoul.com. I'd love to hear how you're doing and how the information I've shared has helped you. Remember what Damion said? Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.